Hinako's doll is technically the first thing we see in Silent Hill F, as the game opens with a young Hinako holding it, telling it she doesn't need her friends anyway. Who even cares about their dumb games? It turns out the other girls won't let her play with them, because she also plays with boys. To which her older sister, Junko, responds by saying she'll play with her instead. This scene doesn't just set up Hinako as a character, but introduces us to one of the behind-the-scenes driving forces of the game, her doll, who appears at various points to warn Hinako to be careful of various characters, particularly Foxmask. But who or what is the doll really? And what does it want? As you play through the game, it becomes clear that Hinako's doll is not a big fan of Foxmask, to say the least. There's a very good reason for this, but it'll take a few playthroughs to finally collect all the files, endings, and extra cutscenes to piece together why. We're gonna get into a lot of lore here, so buckle in. In Ebisuga, most people follow the Inari faith. Yet, the way people worship Inari-sama here is different to other regions of Japan. Here, people dedicate their old items to the goddess, and as Hinako's journal tells us, Inari-sama's statues act as memorials for old or broken tools. This is not just game lore, but also a game mechanic, and it's why you can find so many old items, like pipes, bats and knives, lying around the game. But wait, how can Inari-sama be a goddess if, well, the fox god is male? After all, perhaps the biggest plot point of the game is Foxmask, possessed by the fox god, trying to marry Hinako. Again, Hinako's journal actually points this out. Generally speaking, Inari-sama refers to the goddess of agriculture, Uka no Mitama. In Japanese mythology, Uka no Mitama was the daughter of Susanoo, who slew the Yamata no Orochi. She is generally associated with food and agriculture, and early on in her history, she was also equated with Inari, a kami-sama also associated with not just agriculture, but also foxes. And these foxes acted as her messengers. So yes, in the early days, Inari-sama was thought to be female, likely one and the same as Uka no Mitama. But once Buddhism arrived and started to take control, Inari was changed to be a male kami-sama instead. Silent Hill F even goes into this, mentioning the fox was the goddess's messenger, but over time, their worship was intertwined. Nowadays, if anyone mentions Inari-sama, they'll think of the fox as well. Basically, so much time passed that now people think of the fox itself as Inari-sama. It is no longer a messenger, but has eclipsed Uka no Mitama and taken over her role. Hinako's journal entry on Inari-sama ends with one very important line. She, Sakuko, also says that the goddess and the fox are having a supernatural fight on top of the Inari statues. This isn't just a throwaway. This is the entire background of the game. Uka no Mitama didn't just disappear when the fox took over the Inari faith. She's still in the background, fighting to regain control. We'll come back to Uka no Mitama, but for now, we need to look at the other side of the Inari faith that was also co-opted. That of worshipping and dedicating old objects. Hinako mentions that this is a rather odd aspect of the Inari faith that only really happens here in Ebisuga, and there's a good reason for that too. But this ties into an idea in Japanese folklore that old items, tools, objects, etc. can gain a soul. That old teapot that's been around for 100 years, yeah, it's now sentient. That ancient sword, you better believe there's a spirit in it. This idea of objects gaining sentience is also thought to be tied to the idea that foxes that have lived for 100 years can also transform. These aren't two entirely separate ideas. Much like Ukanomitama and her fox messengers, if you go back far enough in Japanese folklore, these two ideas are intertwined, or like two forks coming from the same path. Hinako's journal entry on Sennen Sugi Shrine tells us that Ebisuga actually used to follow the Tsukumogami faith. Before Inari, the people of Ebisuga worshipped the 1,000-year cedar, the Sennen Sugi of the shrine's name, and because it was so old, the people believed it to be divine. A kami-sama inhabited that ancient tree. But once that tree burnt down, they had to turn their faith elsewhere, and the next oldest thing in the village just happened to be an ancient Inari statue. And so, these aspects of worshipping old objects then fused into the burgeoning fox faith as well. And being so far from other settlements, seeing as, nobody wants to go to the village made up of poisonous gases, which we'll get to in a moment, tools in Ebisuga had to be treated with the utmost care. They couldn't just stroll down the road to buy or trade for a new one if something broke. The Tsukumogami faith intertwined with worship of the tree until they had become the same thing. And then, as time went on, the exact same thing happened with the Inari faith and the foxes. But if we go back even further, the Diary of Revenge tells us that defeated warriors from the Taira clan fled to what is now Ebisuga after the Genpei War. This land was full of poisonous gases, which made it the perfect place to hide, as no one would go near it. These warriors believed the gases came from one of the Yamata no Orochi heads that found its way here after Susanoo, Ukanomitama's father, slew it. And so, they worshipped the water dragon in the hopes that it would quell its anger. However, a peculiar monk donning multiple masks and measuring over 10 shaku, approximately 3 meters in height, arrived and took the villagers to the cedar tree, claiming that it was actually the kami-sama inside this tree that was sapping the water dragon of its evil and keeping it subdued. They should not worship the water dragon, but rather the cedar tree instead. And so they did, burying the sword of their deceased leader at its base. But this sword was buried with the animosity and resentment of its former owner, and these negative feelings continued to grow even after being buried. The people set up 5 Jizo statues around the village to act as a sacred barrier that would essentially nullify that negative energy as long as they stood. Naturally, stories of the sword got out, and during the Great Famine of Oe in 1420, a youth hoping to sell the sword managed to find it. However, it corrupted him, and he went on to do a bit of massacring with it. The sword was hidden again after that, and it also came to be known specifically as the Sacred Sword. As the years went on, information about the sword was largely lost, but when a folklorist did some research on it, they realized that when the 1,000-year cedar burnt down, the next oldest object in the village was actually the sacred sword, not the Inari statue. Once again, Inari had stolen from pre-existing faiths, and that sword remained rather angry. And it's from this angry sword that the weakened kami-sama that inhabited the now destroyed tree gets its power. So, why all this lore drop? How does this relate to Hinako's doll? Because the spirit inhabiting Hinako's doll is the same one that once inhabited that tree. The one now getting the little power it has from a sacred sword full of negative energy that's lying at the base of that tree. A spirit that massively lost power over the years and was supplanted by a fox that used to work for it. Ukanomitama. Ukanomiitama's resentment at being replaced by what was once her messenger, and having her residence burnt down has obviously left for one unhappy kami-sama. That darn fox took everything from her, including not just her Inari faith, but the Tsukumogami faith as well, mixing them into a unique hybrid in the town she originally saved from the angry water dragon, who her father originally slew, by the way. In Hinako's time, most of the village now follows this fox faith, but we're given hints that Hinako perhaps still believes in the old ways, as does Shu, her best friend. And Ukanomiitama, being pissed at the fox for taking over her faith, decides to use Hinako and Shu to get back at him. She possesses Hinako's beloved childhood doll, having lost much of her power thanks to Inari also co-opting most of her beliefs, and tries to get Hinako to take revenge on the fox for her. As we learn throughout the game, Hinako is rather special, being born as what the village calls a blessed or divine child. The fox spirit wants to marry her so it can continue its domination over Ebisuga and continue to protect them from the water dragon. But Ukanomiitama, now a defiled or corrupted god, as I've seen her described in Japanese, wants revenge and is willing to use Hinako to achieve that. Interestingly, one of the boss fights with the Tsukumogami sees it possessing Shu himself, taking on a form incredibly similar to the 3-meter-tall monk, donning multiple masks of legend. And we can see what appear to be tree branches and sacred rope mixed in, presumably from the 1,000-year cedar. And in the final boss battle with it, we can see Hinako's doll at its center instead, powering it. This ending, which you can only get by cleansing the sacred sword, sees Hinako finally defeating both Inari and the Tsukumogami, and we're left with both halves of Hinako overlooking a silent, empty, flooded village that no longer has either god, and looks suspiciously like it has been covered in poisonous gases once more. In the end, Ukanomiitama is neither friend nor foe to Hinako. She simply wants revenge on the fox god for usurping her position, and appealing to the childish side of Hinako that fears growing up and getting married is the easiest way to do that. But what did you guys think of this one? Are there any other topics or characters from Silent Hill F that you'd like me to explore? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you again next time.